Time to say very good afternoon, as we now is, to Baroness Hoey of Lisle Hill and Rathlin. Baroness Hoey, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Michael.
How are you feeling at the moment? Because I'm told that people in Northern Ireland are not very happy being treated like sort of foreigners in their own land, as it were.
Well, no, there is a great deal of dissatisfaction, annoyance, and indeed anger now that it looks like the EU just can change the rules when it suits them. But what I think I want to stress really at the beginning, this should not be in any way presented as a kind of sectarian, Catholic, Protestant, nationalist, unionist issue, because actually everybody in Northern Ireland, whatever their background, whatever they voted, however they voted in Brexit, is suffering now from the way that the protocol is working. So there is now a real anger about it, because we've seen day to day little things happening that no one ever thought could happen. The EU saying that they can't bring, there was a wonderful picture of people with muddy boots, all the garden centres, people wanting to bring in seeds, these kinds of things. And the crucial issue was that right at the beginning, the UK government, particularly under Theresa May, gave in to this idea that because the EU is absolutely determined to protect its market, its single market, and there was a land border with the Republic of Ireland, that apart from the Good Friday Agreement, which actually had nothing to do with, that kind of security or trade border, they had to protect it. And therefore, the nationalist community, the Irish government and the EU kind of connived to say, well, we can't possibly put any kind of trade arrangements at the frontier between our two separate countries. And the British government eventually, and Boris Johnson too, then agreed, oh, well, in that case, we'll leave Northern Ireland in the single market, so abandon us, even though people voted to leave on the, what was on the ballot paper, and we will put this trade border to protect the EU and all their nonsense about, the different size of screws having to be the same wherever, from that kind of trade coming through into Northern Ireland and then going on into the Republic. And my view very clearly is this is the EU problem. They're the ones who are not wanting trade to come over. And remember, most of the trade, the vast majority of trade is Great Britain to Northern Ireland to Great Britain, Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland, and then on to mainland Europe isn't nearly so great. So my view is very simple. If the Irish government and the EU want to solve this, let the lorries go over the Northern Ireland border, the Northern Ireland Republic border, and then they decide who they're going to check. They decide who are going to stop. Don't divide the United Kingdom. So to me, it's a very simple issue of sovereignty. And I'm afraid the government abandoning Northern Ireland, and now they're having to row back very, very strongly.
Yes, and I'm very glad you've explained it that way, Kate, because that's what I thought. As I was, as we were talking about this story yesterday, I had to confess to being slightly confused as to what the issues really were, because when Michael Gove made his statement last week, it wasn't very clear what he was suspending, and it wasn't very clear why he was suspending it. And so I think a lot of us really were kind of confused as to what was going on. But I agree with you completely, because why on earth, if you were driving lorries to the Republic of Ireland, would you take a ferry to Northern Ireland when you could take one to the Republic? I mean, it makes no sense to me. And if you're only doing business in the north, then you don't need to worry, surely.
Yes, and of course, a lot of lorries coming over to Northern Ireland carry different things. And it's, some products are not affected by the EU single market rules, but a lot are. So this idea that Michael Gove has now asked for everything just to be kicked down the can, kick the can down the road for another 2 years, that's not going to solve the issue. And the issue could be solved because it is actually, the reason it's happened is because of political reasons. Whereas technically, if people were allowed to work this through, it could happen. And the protocol is something that no one in Northern Ireland was actually asked to agree to. And whatever the government says and whatever anyone else says, it is actually not doing what was on that ballot paper, which was the United Kingdom would leave, not little bits of it, and leave parts of it.
Well, exactly right. And what about this business of the border points having threats and people, graffitiing messages and things like? What's that all about?
Well, what has happened is because it's at Larne and Belfast, because these trade arrangements mean that lorries have to be stopped, and if they haven't got the right paperwork, they're being sent back or they're being held up for a long time, and that has affected the trade coming into Northern Ireland. Some people have got very angry about that, and yes, there have been. I mean, no one can do anything other than condemn any kind of threats to people who are just doing their job. But I think what people forget, and the media forgets, is that the reason we don't have any trade border at the Irish border, the frontier as I call it, it was precisely because of threats from not just Sinn Féin IRA about what could possibly happen. We can't possibly, really put a dagger, they said, through the Good Friday Agreement. And those threats were always there. The Irish government, Varadkar, went to the European Union with a picture of a bomb that had gone off years ago at the border and said, look, this is what will happen. So, you can understand people, particularly from a community who feel that they've been ignored, that they're somehow, that because they haven't threatened violence over the years, that there've been an awful lot of concessions to Republicans, and that's what it is now that's happening. But the irony is, the last few days, the lorries have been coming over freely, and the world hasn't ended.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, again, it seems to me very similar to what we saw at the beginning of January, where a couple of airlines got confused about papers that people needed to go backwards and forwards between the UK and certain countries in Europe. I think Spain was one. And British Airways staff refused to allow certain people onto a plane because they didn't really know what to do. And it was their mess up, and they fixed it, and it doesn't happen anymore. And this seems to me to be something similar. It's a kind of entirely constructed problem, which can be very clearly unconstructed or deconstructed even by the same people that made it happen.
Absolutely, with the will, the right political will, this could be sorted. It can't go on because we can't have a situation, where tourists and people coming over back and forward to Northern Ireland have to pay a big amount of money every time to bring their pet over. That is just nonsense.
Right.
And I'm just pleased that finally the government have recognised that there is a border. They have been trying to say, Brandon Lewis has been trying to say for ages, that there is no border down the Irish Sea. Well, that has shown that to be completely untrue. And I think, to be fair to the Prime Minister, I think he has really realised very recently, because perhaps he wasn't, I don't know, maybe Michael Gove didn't brief him properly enough, but he has now realised that this is a serious issue. It's not going to go away. And if we can't get the East-West relationships right between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, and between the island of Ireland and Great Britain, then why should Northern Ireland get involved in North-South dialogue with the Irish government? So, the whole thing is very, very serious, needs to be sorted quickly. And the Prime Minister has to take control of that sorting. And
do you worry about Sinn Féin and their kind of willingness to push this all towards the conversation about United Ireland? Because clearly that's their agenda, isn't it?
Well, I mean, obviously, they will do anything to try and separate out Northern Ireland from Great Britain. And this is playing into their hands very nicely. Ironically, the European Union on Friday, having arbitrarily said, well, actually, we're going to now invoke this Article 16, which is a little bit in the protocol that allows the whole thing to be stopped if it's actually injuring Northern Ireland in different ways, environmental, economically, and societal. And they used the word societal and said they were going to invoke it. Now, yes, they went back on it immediately, but I think that, showed that it could be broken, and that this whole question of the Good Friday Agreement was just a smokescreen to allow the EU to punish to punish the United Kingdom. Remember, there were commissioners who actually said the price of Brexit for Britain will be to lose Northern Ireland, and that is not acceptable.
No, of course it's not acceptable, and that's certainly not what anybody who voted Brexit would want to see. But it was an extraordinary gaffe, wasn't it, by the EU? And it seems as though not only did Ursula von der Leyen not actually consult other members of the European Union, doesn't seem like she consulted very many people in the European Commission either. And she just was flailing about like some, spoiled teenager going, well, they can't do that, then I'm going to do this.
I know, and she apparently, I've just been sort of reading up a bit more about her. She wasn't a particularly popular or successful defence minister in Germany. But I'm afraid a lot of people who end up working for the EU and being EU commissioners on huge salaries are failed politicians in other countries. I mean, we were always surprised that some of our failed previous politicians didn't go in, like Tony Blair, for example. I'm sure he'd love to have been a European commissioner. But anyway, actually Peter Mandelson was, so I suppose that's saying something.
Yeah.
But yes, she made a complete mess up. She didn't even consult with the Irish government. And I think that's what a lot of people in Ireland, particularly those in the Republic now who are arguing for the EU, for Ireland to leave the European Union, which would be very sensible given the relationship with Great Britain.
Well, that would actually make more sense than making United Ireland, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. We'll be thrown under a bus, they said, as soon as the EU feels it's necessary. And of course, that looks like what happened last Friday night. But let's just hope that we can get this solved, but won't be solved by little bits of tinkering, little bits of putting off for another month or two. At the end of March, there's new restrictions to come in. We can't have those. It's just not sustainable. And I think the best thing would be to happen for the government to say, look, we made a mistake. This cannot go on. And we are now going to tell the EU, we're going to invoke Article 16, and we're going to go back and work out a way where the Irish government and the EU can show common sense and make this a sensible movement between Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
So does that then mean that we'd have to go back to Brussels and renegotiate whatever part of the deal Ireland is?
Well, I think the clause is invoking Article 16 that then allows that particular bit of it to be looked at. I don't think it needs the whole agreement, certainly not the trade deal, to be looked at. I mean, I don't think anyone wants more months and months of. I mean, that is settled, but this is a very separate part, and Northern Ireland was always treated separately, and I think that was the problem from day one. Our political leaders should be saying, the United Kingdom is leaving as a whole. And of course, because they didn't, obviously, rightly not want the whole of the United Kingdom to stay in the single market, because that would have left us subject to the European Court and all of their restrictions, they were happy to abandon Northern Ireland to all of those awful things in order to get that trade deal. And that's, I think that is going to show up in history as a bit of shocking behaviour, really. By
I suppose the other way to look at it would be that Boris Johnson, who was quoted, was he not, as saying to people in Northern Ireland, well, don't worry, if you get bound up by red tape, just chuck it all in the bin and we'll move on. But, I mean, he does have that kind of slightly cavalier attitude about things, doesn't he, where he'll just say, look, I'll tell you what, we'll figure it out later, but we need the main deal done. Let's not, fall out over this one little part of it, which we can fix down the road.
Yeah, I think that was the general feeling that this is just a minor thing. It can be sorted quickly. And of course, if we didn't have COVID, we'd probably all be going along with our bins Downing Street, throwing bits of bureaucracy in it. But we can't do that at the moment.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, once this lockdown ends and people are free to travel once more, it will be important that this is sorted out, because what you don't want is some of the scenes we're seeing here at Heathrow, where people were jumping over the barriers, apparently, yesterday. Some of these flights coming in from Dubai, because it was taking so long to get through that they were just fed up and they just ran for it, basically.
That's exactly right.
And what about the movements the other way? Because obviously we're still keeping an eye on the immigration border control front here in the UK, with people still coming over in dinghies on the English Channel. Is there any evidence that people are moving through the Republic of Ireland into Northern Ireland and into Britain because of the fact that there's no borders?
Well, I don't think that's. I mean, there's always been free movement, and of course that came long before the European Union. The European Union didn't bring free movement between Ireland and Great Britain, and there was always that risk. But I think it's more the kind of organised crime that is a problem with the border, and perhaps smuggling of some people who are working in very bad conditions. But I don't think at this moment in time, and certainly with the COVID restrictions and the restrictions in flying, that's going to be an issue at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Baroness Hoey, as ever, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for all of that information. Glad to see that Kate Hoey is on the same page as I am on this. I think it is entirely a constructed row, this, with the EU, entirely of the EU's doing, because it's very easy, it seems, as Kate says, to work this problem out. All of these kind of naysayers, Ramonas, rejoiners, whatever you want to call them, saying, see, I told you that it wouldn't work. Told you what's wrong with it. There's nothing wrong. It just needs to be fixed. And so the government can do so as soon as they like. I would suggest they do it sooner rather than later.